Dr. D, again, thank you so much for
Thank you for having me.
giving us time to be here. Real quick note: when we were on hold, your mom called.
Oh, you're kidding.
And I talked to her for a couple minutes. Very nice lady, and we'll make sure, of course, we archive all of our shows. I know she said she doesn't have internet, but I don't know if she has a DVD or something. We'll get this interview to her some way somehow.
I didn't. Oh, okay. I didn't know if she could hear it if she dialed or whatever. I just gave her the station's number. I thought maybe she'd hear it. I know I heard the news when I was with you first called.
Gotcha. Now we'll get you a copy of it, and you can get it to her somehow in whatever medium we have to come up with. But it's great. My mom. I'm a Chicago native. I say it too many times, but my mom is 92 years young, still going strong, and she's always like, I tune around and I try to find that station. I'm like, well, Mom, we're 1,700 miles apart. You're not going to hear it. And at 92, she knows the internet is nothing but bad things. So,
well, she's 92 young too.
Oh, your mom is?
Yeah.
My mom just keeps on going. And
I know, she's like the Energizer Bunny.
Yes. My mom wears me out just talking to her. She is just going and going and going. It is absolutely great. Again, we're talking about your book, Titanic's Resurrected Secret. And again, listeners can go out to the website, your website, which is www.drdrobertdifulgo.com.
And that's for the Titanic one. And then if you drop the DR, that's my regular website.
Okay. Gotcha. Now, where can our listeners get your books from?
Well, you can get order from Barnes & Noble,
okay,
Amazon, and also from iUniverse.
Gotcha.
And the iUniverse, that's the iUniverse, www.iUniverse, and so there's 3 ways to get them. And of course, you can go to your local bookstore and they'll order for you as well.
Gotcha.
If you want it, they could order that way.
Well, I'd like to one thing before we move on, and we'll talk more about the book. But I'd like to talk about some of you go to different book signings. I'd like to talk about that.
Sure.
But I was going through the notes, and the mini series that I saw was called Titanic: Blood and Steel. And I don't know if you had an opportunity to see it, but
I think I did.
Yeah, anybody that's interested in Titanic, I think you can find it on YouTube. It's in a few different places, and it's a couple years old, but a very interesting book. Of course, it's about building the ship and people's lives and the different religious conflicts and all the different people involved and how Harlan and Wolff tried to keep costs down. And at the end of the story, which, well, I'm not going to give it away because we all know what happens, but the whole story is about the building of what they call the Guarantee Group. That was what I was trying to think of. And that's the group of people that were part of the shipbuilding process. They actually, Thomas Andrews was part of that group. While they were not regular crew, they were to be on board to make sure everything was running right. If paint needed to be touched up, they were there to oversee that. And the series ends with them getting on the ship. But if anyone who has interest in Titanic, again, it's called Blood and Steel. And I found it to be pretty good. I watched it on Netflix, and I found it to be a pretty good little series.
And they did another one with the electricians.
Okay.
And that was they did a whole series on that, about the electricians keeping the power going, how they were able to do that right to the very end.
Through your research, and this is a question I had for you, and somebody else, Tracy, wrote in. We've got a group of engineering students up at the University of Utah that listen to us every Saturday night. We want to say hello to that whole gang. They always tune in. And Tracy writes, she says, Dr. Robert, can you talk a little bit about People in Third Class? The movie, James Cameron's movie kind of portrayed those people as, of course, they were the lowest class of them all. Were those people able to get out, or did a lot of those people perish down in third class?
Well, if you look at those statistics and you see, like for women and children, you see that in first class you've got 90% of them made it. second class, and the numbers keep dropping to get to the very end because they were taken off by station.
Right.
You know, that concept that they had in those days, where the captains of industry, they're the people we have to look up to. They're the finest. They're the best. So they have to be taken care of because they're the ones that run the world. You know, it was that whole concept that they had, and then it's like the way we think of human beings today versus as they did in the 18th century. It's that kind of thought process.
Right.
You know, it's what people believe is right. You know, it's that Freud. You know, the survival of the fittest type thing. They were the fit. They should be saved.
Right.
I don't know if that answers it, but yeah, when you go to any of the museums, they give you the survival rate, and you see it's pretty bad when you get to third class.
Yeah.
Plus, they didn't have any more boats.
Yeah.
Which added to the problem as well.
Well, and the boats were so. I mean, of
half
course,
full, half empty.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Right.
It was an atrocity. The whole thing was because they never, like we do, we practice. When you go on cruises now, you go to your mustard station.
Right.
You know where to go and whatever. That sort of thing. No one knew what was going on.
Right.
Even the davits that they used were new.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, yeah, and they didn't want to. I think if I read right initially, I think Thomas Andrews, when he designed the ship, designed it to have plenty of lifeboats, but it gave it cut down on too much deck space and didn't give it the look they were looking for.
And I quote Ismay, it may look like it may look like we're expecting a problem.
Right. Was Ismay now when the ship sank? And they went through the Board of Inquiry and all the other things. Was anybody charged? Was Ismay charged with anything, or was White Star?
He pretty much got off scot-free. As a matter of fact, talking about that, if anyone ever had the opportunity to go to Southampton, they use the old courthouse there, and what they do is they do all those hearings with the voices and the people responding. So you sit in court and you listen to it, and you see their faces and what comments were made. You know, were you going too fast, whatever, and that's fascinating. Just to hear to read the Inquirer and the Senate and the British one. That's really quite interesting.
Yeah, I've read different books on the Inquisition or trial or whatever its formal term is, but interesting is so again. I think it's just as it is in so many cases, the wealthy get away with murder. A question that Robert sends in says, Dr. Defulgo, can you talk a little bit about Captain Smith? There are rumors that he went down with the ship. There are rumors that he jumped in the water and swam away. There's rumors that he got on a lifeboat. What are your thoughts?
I think he went down with the ship. I think that would be nobody. It's not like Ismay. Ismay did get off.
Right.
We know that. But either I don't. He would have been discovered. I would have thought eventually. If he was somewhere about, it's like Elvis is somewhere type thing.
Yeah.
I think he went down with the ship.
Was he asleep at the time when the ship hit the iceberg? Wasn't he in bed?
Well, he wasn't on duty. Yes, he was. He wasn't on duty at the time. Yeah, he was not. Yeah, he was in his cabin, as I recall.
Yeah. An article I actually saw an engineering article, a naval engineering article pop up the other day online, and I just wanted to get your take or see if it's something you came across. But there's a lot of there's a lot of speculation as far as the collision. Of course, there's some people say, there's some that look at it as the ship collided. And then, of course, James Cameron showed in some of his dives of the bottom plates being laying all over where, possibly a gigantic, ginormous hole was opened up. There's of course the main theory that the compartments, while they were watertight, they were only watertight up so high, and with Olympic that was changed, where the bulkheads came, I believe, right up
Yeah,
out of the
to the
deck.
main deck, which
Right.
they did. Right.
But you see so many different, you hear about so many different things. One being, um, would it have been better to have just rammed the iceberg head on? And with the decision to try to steer around it, there's different people that say that was handled very poorly, that there was really enough room there. Again, now I know in a ship of that size and of that era, it's not like today where they pull the controls back up on the bridge and that really happens under the water. Back then they had the telegraph or whatever, they would see that down below. It was very it was somewhat fly by no wire, if you will. It was just people watching things. Do you think some bad decisions were made as far as how it was handled?
I think bad decisions were made from, first of all, how many of the ships stopped that night?
Right.
And they just kept, wanted to make that record, had to make that record, had to beat the Canard line, do something because they were in such competition with them as well. What's interesting, that J.P. Morgan was supposed to be on that ship.
He was,
but he got the flu, and he owned part of that. He was part owner in that company as well, but he had gotten the flu,
so he never made
missed the whether he would have gotten off, who knows? But he was scheduled to be on there as well, which I think was interesting.
Yes. Talk about high society at the time, world power players.
Oh, some serious. What's heartbreaking? I don't mean to backlog, and I want to get to your other question. When I went to the Harvard, and when I went to Harvard's Memorial Library, there's a letter that Harry wrote, and it says to his book dealer that he's real excited that he's going on to Mauritania in March, and then he's going to purchase this book, and he's very excited because he's taking the Titanic back. When you read that, you just chills run through your body when you see that.
Well, yeah, because again, there was so many, and I also believe somewhere that Titanic was booked was booked out. I mean, quite a long ways out. There was a whole new. Not crew necessarily, but a whole new group of passengers that were going to get right back on in New York and go back the other way.
Yeah, it was. Matter of fact, talking about that, I don't know if you're familiar with the Clark family, the one that should be at your end. He was a senator, made millions copper mining, I think it was.
No,
his
not.
daughter just recently died. And the Clark man had a huge mansion. Well, to make a long story short, they were scheduled to take the Titanic back. And it's the Clark family. Look at them up. Matter of fact, there's a new book, a book about the daughter of Senator Clark, and it's called Empty Mansions. And it's all about the mansion he built in Fifth Avenue, which is not there anymore. But all about that, and of course, there's a Titanic connection because it's that period again.
Right. Again, so many people tied, so many wealthy, high-level, influential people were tied to that ship. It's just amazing.
Now, you had asked me about, you were talking about places where, like Branson and all.
Yes, I'd like,
you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, let's definitely touch on that subject for to get a little flavor of it. And again, people did write in asking if you could discuss that a little bit because, again, there's so much interest in this subject, and these are places people can go and touch and feel.
Well, I've been to Pigeon Forge twice. My first time was with the Titanic Historical Association. They were doing their 50th anniversary of the group, of the organization, celebration. And then I went there to launch the book. And, of course, the museum is wonderful that you can see there. It's just fascinating because they have all artifacts that they have collected and these are not one the collections that they have, and then they have special exhibits. So you actually go through the ship again. You know, you
Gotcha.
can go through the ship, and you can see all these artifacts, and they start at the very beginning from its construction. It's interesting because I've been in Belfast, and of course, you know, they have a huge museum now in Belfast where the slips of where the Olympic and Titanic were. For
Right.
years, it was just desolated and neglected. Now it's a big museum there. And I had gone there during the centennial because I made the trip to Belfast and Southampton and Cherbourg as well, because they were all involved in the ship when they picked up the last cut, because that's where they had gotten the Wideners from, according to, because the mother was they were taking the train from Paris to Cherbourg to pick up the ship, which was late because you remember it had an accident, almost ran into the New York. They had a collision almost when it left Southampton.
Interesting.
Aware of that, but that's so that they'll go through that whole story with you. You know how it was conception, it's how it's built. Then they take you through compartments and let you exactly see what the rooms look like, and really to get a feel for the experience of it all. That's Pigeon Forge.
And are there real Titanic artifacts there?
Real Titanic artifacts there that they have, and that were contributed either from different organizations or people who collected. There's a lot of Walter Lord's collection was there when I was there that he had. So there are artifacts that they have that people have contributed. I had given them a Lloyd's magazine that was written in 1912 that they took from me as well. I made a contribution to them. Because you can get, different types of artifacts. And I was fortunate enough to meet the last survivor before she passed away.
Really?
Delvina, Davina, all of a sudden I went blank.
I know what you're talking about. I know exactly.
Yeah, all of a sudden they're just going blank. And Melvina Dean, that's what I meant.
Okay.
Yeah, Melvina Dean. Because she was she was an infant on the ship, but
right.
She's famous by proxy, but she would always say, my mother said, but she was a fascinating person. My experience with her is when I met her, and she corrected her name in Walter Lord's book for me. She said, this is not my name. My name is, and she crossed it out, and she signed my book. But they had, all kinds of, it's really quite good. The exhibit there. And then there's the one in Branson as well. And that's the one I'll be in April.
Yeah, I would love to get to Branson and see it. Now, is Branson, which one is it that has either it's half the size one or there's it physically looks like the Titanic is behind the building?
Well, they both are like that. They both
Okay.
have, but the one in Branson is bigger. And they give you the proportions of how much. Yeah, they actually you see the bow, 2 stacks and all, and that's how you go into the museum.
And then you were talking about at Southampton, where the ship was built at Harlan and Wolff. Like you said, the shipyard got so run down, and the museum there, I hear, you've been there, is just fascinating. Wasn't there also a competition? Was it a year or two ago? I thought I saw something where some engineers actually built a full-size, I think it was the first 10 feet of the ship, and built it with the technology of the day.
I'm not unaware. No, I was unaware of that. No.
I don't know if that's something that's new, or maybe it wasn't that long ago. It was a competition for engineering students and welders to actually build. I think it was the first 30 feet of the ship, the actual height, which was ginormous. By hand in the way they did back then with those type of tools, and they all documented the amount of effort it took to build this thing.
Well, it's a fascinating museum if you get to go to Belfast, because they take you through the process of how it was built, and all these museums that they have where there's a connection with the ship are really quite fascinating. Belfast, Southampton, even Cove, which it was old Queenstown.
Interesting. We got an email in earlier. Jody writes in. She actually has your book and said it's a fascinating book. Listeners need to buy it. She's a Titanic. She's Titanic crazed. She had a couple of things that she wanted me to run by you just to get your opinion. Is there any truth to there was a Japanese survivor who escaped the ship, but when he returned to Japan, he was shamed and told he should have gone down with the vessel?
Not aware of the story. I think I heard something, but I really couldn't swear by it.
Okay. Another question she wanted to pose to you. Milton Hershey, a.k.a. the man who's behind one of the greatest chocolate bars of all time, had tickets to be on the Titanic, but changed his plans at the last moment.
You know, I didn't hear about that one. I know about Morgan, but I didn't know about Hershey as well. But it's likely because anybody who was anybody,
right,
would go on board, because if you always did the maiden voyage, it was like that was the thing to do.
Right. Another question is just a little statement. See if you agree or not. The one and only ocean liner in history that's been sunk by an iceberg, Titanic. No others that ever happened to.
Sunk by an iceberg.
Yeah, it was the only one.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
Well, I think it was just she was stating that Titanic was the only ship to have ever been lost due to hitting an iceberg.
As far as I know as well, you?
I think so. I agree with you.
I think so. I know there have been greater sea disasters, and like the Ireland, the one up there in that sunk,
right,
the loss of lives, which seems to be overshadowed by the Titanic.
Interesting. And her last one was the infamous iceberg that brought Titanic to her knees and sunk her has been floating around. It's been determined that it's been floating around since before 1000 BC. I found that interesting.
That's interesting. I wonder if it still has the red paint on it.
I'm curious if it's still floating around.
We'd have to check with our weather people to find out how long an iceberg lasts. I would think by the time it got to the equator, it may melt.
Who knows? Yeah, it was obviously on a southerly path, and those things do move. I mean, they move quite fast in the scheme of things.
Yeah, if you've taken and I have taken last summer we took a cruise to Alaska, and of course you go up there to watch the glaciers drop. You know how they?
Yeah.
It's really quite fascinating.
It is. It's like, where does all that come from?
Really quite fascinating.
Have you had the opportunity to see the exhibit? I think at the Luxor they have a permanent exhibit now of Titanic, and I believe I don't know if it's at where you were, if you went to at Pigeon Forge or Branson, where there's actually a hull plate where the hull plate that was retrieved was. I mean,
I've seen it. There's a traveling one. I forgot the name. Matter of fact, I was in their home base is in Buena Park in California. That does that exhibit, the Titanic. I don't have it with me, the actual name of it. But they have a permanent exhibit, then they have a traveling one.
Gotcha.
But I've seen that one that you're talking about. Because as a matter of fact, when I went, they give you tickets when you come on board. And you just, this is your boarding pass, and you have to, it's someone that was on the ship, and you find out, unless you know who it is, then you find out later whether the person survived or not. You go to the list at the end to see if you're survived or not. When you see third class, a lot of people said, "Oh, I'm dead," but strangely enough, I had gotten Maldina Veen again. Believe it or not, I got hers when they handed out the cards.
Wow. Did you ever look through some of the? I know that the interviews are a little older, but the actual survivors that could remember the disaster. Did you get an opportunity to talk to any of those people?
No, they had either passed, or no. I only met Maldina Veen. As a matter of fact, I met Melvina Dean. We had the Titanic Association took her with them on the Queen Elizabeth II to do a crossing.
Okay.
Back in 91, or I think it was 91. And that's where I met her. So she finally made the trip that she never made to go to Kansas. She was supposed to go to Kansas at the time.
Gotcha.
And she was the only one that I had met. Now, we met, they had grandchildren of these, of survivors, like the Strausses. I met their descendants, because a lot of people who are descendants of them now go to different groups and speak.
Interesting. Again, so many fascinating. Again, so many fascinating people that are tied to this. This famous shipwreck. What's your thoughts on? One thing that I watched a special here not too long ago. Ballard did a thing on Titanic on Discovery Channel. And I know he's got some reservations now for never laying claim to the wreck, because while I think my own opinion, I think it's interesting for people to see these artifacts, but they have really picked the debris. Feels pretty clean. My understanding, things that are of substance. What are your thoughts of that, of them, of them diving and bringing this stuff up? Do you think it should be left alone, or do you think it really needs to be? People need to see this.
I think it's, if you don't have anything that's left of something, it may be lost in time. It's sort of like, look at Pompeii, how many things that they've taken up and cast, of the bodies of those people. But it's something that we sort of, remember them by.
Yeah.
I think maybe a portion of the ship should be left as a memorial, sort of like the Arizona.
Right.
In respect to those people that have died. And I think that it's a fine line between what do we leave as a memorial and what do we keep to remember. I think the two, by remembering, means that they haven't died in vain either.
Right. Yeah, and as long as they're not, as long as it's, I know when the Titanic Historical Society was formed, they were selling coal. I actually have some. I bought some. They were scraping it up off the bottom. They were trying to get funding, and I think it takes these private organizations. Again, people are so interested in this. It is history. It truly is, and it's a big piece of history. And I think Titanic. While the kids of today are looking at different things, I think it's something that even the young people need to know about. And I personally think I think myself it's cool to be able to go and touch that side of that hull and look at those things up close. I think there's going to be a time, maybe not in my lifetime or our lifetime, when it's going to turn into a big rust spot. There'll be nothing left down there. I know Ballard's biggest concern is that these dive operations, his biggest concern, and he's gone on record saying it, he's always had the fear of somebody, putting an explosive or something in there, try to blow the ship open and get deep into it and pull. I mean, because, if you can imagine what's on the outside, you can imagine what's on the inside.
Yeah, and of course there's that $100 million worth of jewels that nobody knows where it is. Well, look, how about they've just found the Merrimack,
right,
off the coast of France. Well, I was in the exhibit. It was in Cherbourg. That's where it was. I was trying to remember where I saw it, but they had just, because not too long ago they retrieved the Monitor,
right,
which is here in Newport, somewhere down there in Virginia. But I know they had just discovered the Merrimack, or the Old Virginia, as it's called. But like you said, these things are going to disappear, and will the memory of it go with it as well? Exactly. I think that's that fine line between the two.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Fringe Radio with our guest, Dr. J. Robert Defulgo, talking about Titanic this evening. And again, its impact on the world and on society, how much it's really changed things. Do you Branson or the other one,
Pigeon Forge.
Pigeon Forge? Would it be fun for anyone who has interest to go to these exhibits?
Oh, it's if they're a Titanic person, they will be in heaven.
Gotcha.
I mean, they'll get so much information, and it's a very fulfilling experience for you, and it's just laid out very well. From going from the taverns, they duplicated the taverns that they had in Southampton to give you an idea of where the sailors had gone the night before or whatever. So they give you a nice flavor. I mean, it's really done very, very well. It's just not going to a place just seeing an exhibit with a label on it.
Right.
You will experience it. That's what I could say. It's an experience more than just that visual. It's really quite good.
It's you've obviously done a lot of research on Titanic. I know that now there's some new websites coming up because there's more and more talk about the sister ships, Britannic and Olympic.
Right.
If you it's interesting. Of course, what Olympic was the first one to be built, correct?
Right.
And then Titanic, and then wasn't Britannic supposed to be the grandest of them all? I believe Britannic was a little bit bigger, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so, but I'm not. Don't quote me on that. I just know that they were. Yes, of course, the war broke out, so
Right.
it got drafted.
But Olympic was, of course, was basically a copy of Titanic, and what she was hit by the Hawk. I mean, she went through a few issues, and then they made they put the double bottom on, I believe, or they doubled up the bottom, and then they brought the bulkheads up to the top. But that ship sailed flawlessly for many, 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 many years
Until the 30s. Then they scrapped her.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, you could see parts of her. There's lots of her paneling and furnishings can be seen. There's a lot of people had purchased them.
Right.
So there's a lot of. Matter of fact, there's the Swan pub. It's in England, and they bought all the paneling and the rooms, so you can go to first-class dining room and see what it was like.
Isn't part of, and I could be wrong on this, Bob, but isn't some of that woodwork, I want to say it was at Rockefeller Center. Was it in New York too? There's some of it, or I don't know if that was the Grand Staircase. I thought somewhere I read that ship, when it was torn apart, I mean, it was literally, with the exception of the steel, quite a bit of it was bought and purchased.
Yeah, it was auctioned off by, I don't know if it went to New York, but I know that a lot of it is in England.
Gotcha.
A lot of it was in England that they, that people that they had bought and put it. One person has it in their own home, which is interesting.
Yeah. I know one thing that is also starting to come to light is, and I found this pretty interesting. There are really and truly, in as much as Titanic's in the limelight, there's really very few photos of Titanic. To my knowledge, there's only one short real clip of Titanic. Every time people talk about Titanic, I know even in the Ballard documentary, that's not Titanic, that's Olympic that's being used. When I think it was 80 or 87, 88 when they found the ship, and then Martin Sheen narrated the 2-hour special when they actually let people see the ship for real. But my understanding is actual real footage and photos of Titanic are very few and far between.
You know of the one that they discovered, the film?
No.
You're aware of that? You'll have to look it up online, because when I was on Southampton, they found it in someone's garage.
Is that the one where they? It's a very. I actually saw a clip that just appeared on the internet as of recent, because I try to keep tabs on it. It's only like 20 seconds, and it's really one of the only clips that shows Titanic on the side. I mean, there's just very, very few pictures of her.
Well, see, nobody thought. She was sort of. The fame came after.
Right.
It's the second one. It's not the first one. The Olympic will always be, was the first one. And I guess, it's sort of, well, we've done this before,
Interesting, interesting. One of our listeners that is listening right now over on the other side of the pond, our good friend Red is a avid listener, and he's been to it. It's called the Swan.
Oh, so he's yeah.
In Liverpool. He knows it very well. The Old Swan, as they call it now, and he said he's been in there and has seen it many times. But again, I found it very interesting that as far as photos go, again, all the pictures they show of the ship pulling away, that's really not Titanic. Just a couple, and then of course the night shot of her heading out, and I believe there's also a film of her getting fitted out. But that's it. That's really it.
You get a hold of Father Brown's collection. Now, Father Brown went on board because they found his glass negatives not too long ago, about 20 years ago, maybe.
Gotcha.
In an attic, they had found his glass negatives, and he's got a lot of pictures of the ship because he boarded at Southampton and got off at Queenstown, which is Cove now. He was a priest, and he was called because he did that little trip right around, but he took pictures. So look at Father Brown's has a nice collection of pictures of the ship.
Now, was that just like a one-night cruise?
Well, it would have been, I guess you would have gone from Southampton to Cherbourg. That would be, it would take you, and then you'd pick those people up. And because I know it came in the afternoon, they loaded. As soon as they were loaded, they left and went to Cove, or Queenstown, as they called it next.
Okay, so the ship made a few stops then before it headed across.
Yeah, it left when it left Southampton. Then from Southampton, it went to Cherbourg to pick up. That's where they picked up the Astors and all.
Okay.
Those, and then it left again, and it was late because of the incident with the New York.
Gotcha.
It was late at that time, and then they picked them up. See, when I was in Europe during the centennial, I went to Southampton, and I went to Cherbourg, and they had a whole big exhibit, and that was a fascinating exhibit because it shows the ship coming in and the time that it took, and they had it the time that the ship comes in and until it sinks. Wow. It was a fascinating exhibit they had there, and then of course it went to Cove, which is old. They changed the name, which was Queenstown. And I was there with my Titanic group years ago.
Wow. When
we did this checking out. And they have a museum there as well to see it.
Now, the museum, is it in Southampton? Is that where the new museum that kind of looks like the bow of the ship, if you will, from a distance?
That's Belfast.
That's Belfast. And then
There's three of them. Yeah, it looks like it's hitting an iceberg, or it's the bow of a ship, a crystal. As a matter of fact, they even have plates of how thick the ship was when you go in.
Wow.
It's just the outside is a phenomena to see because everything is figured out, where it sunk, what time it was, and as I said, you could see the slips where she was.
Now, it's really the last White Star ship, the Tender, that ran back and forth. That's dry docked and restored there, correct?
Right. Matter of fact, that's in the novel too. All of a sudden, I went blank. The name.
I know it's kind of like a little Titanic, but it's a ferry-sized boat, right?
Yeah, it was a. They used it, because it wasn't a deep port, so they had to get the crafts to pick them up at the pier. I had gone to the original pier to where I can't believe it just slipped my mind. We went to the pier where it originally was because now they've dug deep piers because now the Queen Elizabeth comes in, but they didn't have that at the time when the Titanic was there.
Nomadic.
Right. They didn't have any. Right. There you go. Thanks. I remember it slipped my mind, but it was a restaurant in Paris on the Seine for the longest time. That's how it got saved. Its sister ship went down during the war, but this was somehow or other it survived, and it went to Paris for the longest time. It went up and down the Seine as a dinner ship, and then of course when it went up, they decommissioned it, Belfast bought it, got it back again to bring it back.
Now, is it sitting in Titanic's berth right now?
No, it's sitting adjacent as where the museum is.
Okay.
When you walk through, it's on the left side. The museum is in front of you where the slips are.
Right.
But this is just in its own area.
Now, the original
They were restoring it when I was there.
is the original
Dramatic, right? I could not remember. Thanks.
is Titanic's build out area, is that kind of the way? Now, of course, the overhead cranes are gone, I would assume.
Right.
But is the building area where it was built the same concrete just as it was back then?
Well, I think what they've preserved, what they're trying to preserve is all the areas that were there, like the drafting house and that kind of thing is still there.
And I think there's a big push now too in New York. My understanding is where White Star had their dock. I saw a piece on that not too long ago where it actually says White Star Lines. The building's there; it's all decrepit. And my understanding is somebody's trying to buy that and restore that as well because the docks are still there.
Oh, yes, I heard something about that as well.
Right. And they still say White Star, and they're abandoned. Nobody uses them. I don't know if Cunard owns them now, or Cunard owns them, but I saw some interesting stuff. Red also chimed in and said there's also a pub in the center of the city called the White Star, which surprisingly has quite a bit of curio items from that area as well, from that time frame.
Yeah, I know they had when we were there. What's it called? The Grapes. I think that's what was the name of the pub that was there, where the two sailors got drunk and, of course, couldn't miss the ship. But they have a fascinating museum in Southampton.
My interest is so heavy in this subject. Someday I'm going to find a way to get there because, like yourself, I can tell it in your voice and other people that I have talked to who've gone there. They said it's just the feel of it. It is. If you have any interest in this, it is the place to go. Just to absorb it. There's so much there.
Yeah, and as I said, it was that strong historical context, and they're not. See, Belfast has just embraced they have been carrying the shame for years of the tragedy. It's only now that they embrace it as that it's something they don't have to be ashamed of. They were the great builders of these ships.
Right.
So because that's what's so neglected. So it's something Belfast to see now.
I definitely want to. I want to make it there in my lifetime. Again, the only exhibit I ever saw was the one at the Luxor, which was nice.
It's a nice exhibit. I know which one you're talking about. That's Titanic Incorporated or something.
Yes.
They're a big organization. Matter of fact, because I had met up with them because they had an exhibit at the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia not too long ago.
Little pricey to get into, but again, I think it's well worth the investment. There's so much to look at.
And yeah, if it's your first exposure, it is, and yeah, it is interesting to see.
What do you have? We've got just a couple minutes left, actually a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
What's on the horizon for you next? What's your next project? Is there any more White Star Titanic projects, or what do you have on the workbench?
Well, I'm toying with the idea. There's actually a sequel to this book because we only solved one of the mysteries.
Okay.
And we still haven't to solve the mystery of who is in Grave 223.
Gotcha.
We were just able to find the book.
You need to make a little mini series out of it.
Well, we'll see. Maybe it'll. Somebody will. The right ears may hear it and say, "I think that's a good idea for a series." We'll see.
Well, it sounds like it. I want to thank you so much for being here. And
I want to thank you for making it very easy and comfortable for me.
Oh no, and I would love to have you back on. Matter of fact, one of the other authors that I can't think of the gentleman's name. It's he also has written a book on Titanic. He's a Titanic expert. He actually contacted me when I was looking for your information. Somehow he got my information, and it'd be great to get a couple different people on at the same time and talk about it. It's such a fascinating subject. I don't think you can ever beat it to death because there's so much more that keeps coming out of it. Like you said with Father Brown, I'm going to dig into that. I want to look into that. The history, it just keeps opening and opening and opening. And again, I encourage people to grab your book. Again, it's Dr. J. Robert Defulgo. You can check.
And of course, I'm sorry, Pat. I just wanted to mention that if anybody happens to be in Branson, like I said, you could check the Branson's website and their events. That I'm going to be there on what is it? Robert Defulgo. It says Sunday, April 9th through the 12th.
Gotcha.
For Titanic's third annual book signing fair in Branson. So if they happen to be there, I'd love to meet them.
Oh, well, again, I would love to meet you, too. And again, I'll stay in touch because I would like to have you back on again.
Please do, Pat.
And I'll send you some info. I want to read the book. It sounds like an interesting read.
All right. Well, I promised you I'd send you a courtesy one.
Okay. I'm going to take you up on that. And we got to make sure your mom gets a copy of this show.
All right.
Okay, my friend. Hey, thank you so much for being here this weekend and giving us your time. And, again, God bless. Be safe.
And thanks for giving me exposure to more people. That's really very appreciative on my part.
That's what it's all about. Have a great evening.
All right. Thanks, Pat.
Take care. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.